This is the It's My Time podcast with Asher Tchoua.
So how you been?
Right. Man. Good, man. Just busy, man. Just job and back and forth to Alabama.
Mhm.
My cousin got a kidney this year, so um I went in all the month of February, was able to drive him back and forth to Nashville and Huntsville. So good, man. I know the pandemic, some people are, the pandemic hit them in different ways, man. But the pandemic has been super good for me because I can just pack my laptop up
Yeah.
and I can get in the car and go, and I can still do my job just like this. So,
Right.
um, so for me, man, the pandemic definitely is good, has been good. It started off 2020 did start off. My ex, my ex fiance left me, but um, it turned out to be, you got to look at the bright side and understand that,
Yeah.
people have to, make decisions. And I think, that decision for her was not easy to make, but I think it
Mhm.
was a decision she needed to make for herself. And so, you know, man, but other than that, man, everything is good, rolling. And, I just, man, 2020 has been just, just for me, a phenomenal year of clarity
Mhm.
and just, I'm on pace to what I want to do, what I've been doing, but now I really understand my purpose,
Right.
um, and I'm so focused on it, so
That's
so
good.
that's the beauty, man. How about you?
Man, it it's funny. It's almost like we started on opposite tracks because I was just saying from 2019 started the podcast, got into it full swing, recorded a bunch. Started 2020, I was ready to go, just taking in opportunity after opportunity. I started looking at the consulting piece, seeing how I was going to use that, looking into real estate to hopefully start um, funding a lot of the projects that I wanted and start building residual income. And then, of course, I got a new job then working with FEMA. I ended up deploying to Puerto Rico at the end of
Oh,
January. And
wow.
then very soon, it's like getting settled there, not having internet. It got a little bit tougher to communicate stateside with the people that helped me in the background with the editing and everything like that, posting the
Right.
episodes. So I kind of struggled through the month of February, but then after a while, I kind of I gave up on myself. I don't know if I'd say I just quit. I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. So it's like, of course, I kept going to the job for as long as they would have us, and then come March, everything shut down. So we came back home, work remotely for about 2-3 months, and then they had to shut that down because um, we couldn't we're hired to be site inspectors, so if you can't be there in person to inspect the site, there's a lot less work to go through. There's only so many administrative tasks you can do or so much planning ahead you can do for work you don't have. So then from there I just kind of came back here to my parents, kind of lounged about a bit. Of course, my folks did well to look in on me just because like, okay, yeah, you have the 2 week quarantine. I kind of use that to be like, okay, I'm quarantining. I came from the outside. I don't know what I might have brought with me, so I don't want it to affect you guys, but we try not to let that be um such a thing. But one of the blessings for me kind of tuning out of the news and things like that, I I wasn't exposed to as of much of what was going on, like all the protocols and things of that sort. And fast forward to now, this year, I started the podcast back up, like going back listening to older episodes, made an effort to release more of what was already recorded, and then also recording new episodes now, following up with previous guests, and just really making an effort to just get back into why I love doing this and what it is that drew me to it. And really just getting that passion back. And then I found work locally at Home Depot, which is another blessing in disguise in itself, where it's showing me a lot of the practical things that I learned in school, or at least the tools that someone would use to build a project that I'd never really took the time to sit down and fiddle with or go work on a project. Is like, oh, okay, by organizing this, I get to work with a group that's really specialized in organizing local stores to make them all look the same. Like now is the spring season, so we're putting things in place where they fit. And one thing that I noticed immediately, it's like a lot of people, they show up and they grumble. And I was like, oh, this reminds me of where I was last year. Like you show up to something new, everybody's always got something to complain about. And then it reminded me again to my
Mhm.
first job out of college. I was like, okay, I got to do what worked back then and not do what I did last year when it just didn't work out. And I was just like, oh, I let the grumbling in 2020 kind of feed into what I was doing, where everybody was sitting online just watching, like, oh, like, what's the count? What's the death count up to? Where's it spreading to? Where's it spreading? And I was just
Yeah,
like, I didn't want any of that in my head, but also at
yeah,
the same time, I wasn't doing anything to combat it. So getting back on my personal development, like reading Dennis Kimbrough, daily affirmations, daily motivations, and really pouring into myself, and then tapping into some of the groups. And then I just realized, okay, like focus on the one thing that you need. So I'm focusing on building the podcast, and I'm focused on resting. So every single day before work, I have to make sure I rest at least 6 to 7 hours. Otherwise, working the night shift, it's going to be rough to do 10 hours 4 times a week if you don't sleep during the daytime when everybody's running and active. So that's kind of
yeah.
what happened with me from 2020 to now.
Okay. Wow. What a transformation, man.
Right.
You know, so that's the beauty, man. That's the beauty. And hey, I'm a firm believer of, I always wanted to I just remember when I first found, well, I won't say first, because somebody showed me Eric Thomas in Alabama.
Mhm.
Somebody I knew said, "Hey, have you heard of this guy?" We didn't really know his name at the time, but it was the Guru Story.
Mhm.
And then I moved to Delaware, and then my nephew had the Guru Story, but it was the one with the football player Giovanni running on the beach.
Mhm.
And I was like, "That's not the video." And so I started searching for more uh, ET's videos, and I ran into the TGIMs,
Mhm.
and um, and that was right at the moment of me writing my thesis.
Mhm.
And what a motivation. So what I would do, sitting in the library, I literally would go to YouTube, and I started from season 1 of TGIM,
Yeah.
and I would play it as I'm researching. And so I didn't listen to music, I didn't listen to anything but ET, motivating,
Right.
and just those TGIMs. And um, I can remember having the opportunity to talk to a football team, and man, I had the look. I mean, I had the ET shirt, no alarm clock needed. My passion wakes me up. I had some shorts on, and
Mhm.
and I told the Guru Story in my version, and it was just, I really wanted to do exactly what he was doing. I wanted to speak to NBA, to the NFL. What he was doing, I wanted to do. And
Right.
I got with a group of ladies. We had a mastermind group, and it was 3 ladies. One lady,
Mhm.
I worked with her. She was the computer lady
Yeah.
at the community college I was working at, and then her sister, and then her sister had a friend,
Mhm.
and we would meet on a Saturday, and just everybody was trying to be an entrepreneur in their own right.
Yeah.
And so we were just talking, and I was like, man, The thing I hate about teaching is I hate writing lesson plans. I can't stand them. And they were like, well, isn't that kind of a part of your job? I was like, yeah, but I hate them. And one of the ladies, she finally told me, she was like, what are you gonna do? Like, nobody's knocking down your door to hear your motivational speech.
Mm.
And it kind of hit me. I kind of like looked at her like, and she said, but you're teaching, so what are you gonna do? And she really put into my mindset what's important. And from that moment on, when I finally got it, I decided that I was gonna master teaching,
Mm.
because that was the paycheck that was coming in. Like, I saw the work I put out, I saw
Right.
something coming back
Right.
because I was getting paid to teach. So
Right.
um, I then focused on mastering teaching. And the what we don't know as individuals,
Mm.
the thing you think you're going for
Mm.
is it will kind of be folded into what you're trying to master anyway. Because mastering teaching is mastering speech.
Right.
I stand in front of people doing a speech. Now, it may be related to historical material because we're in a history class or whatever class that I'm teaching,
Mm.
but it's still speaking.
Right.
And so that was probably 2014, 2015.
Okay.
And we fast forward to 2019, and all of that hustling that I had done, all of those driving from school to school, leaving my apartment at 6:30 in the morning and coming back at 10 p.m.,
Mm.
and getting back up the next morning to do it again and again. And I remember people saying, man, you put too much gas in your car, you're crazy. And at the time I had my Pathfinder that had over 300,000 miles on it.
Mm.
They're like, man, you putting this thing on the road. And 2019, from the work that I put in, Dell State offered me a full-time position.
Right.
And so when you think about hindsight, 2020 is I get this job right before the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
So imagine now, because I'm locked in for three years. My contract is 3 years that they have me under their contract.
Mm.
So for 3 years, I will constantly get paid,
Yeah.
based on the job that they have me to do. So I finally, and like now, I'm finally okay with. I was never meant to be Eric Thomas.
Right.
I was meant to be Merril Holloway, and
Mm.
Merril Holloway's purpose in life is shaped in educating the youth into creating within themselves their own learning process.
Right.
And that's what to talk with you and
Mm.
to share the story. That's what all of the struggles were about.
Right.
All of the struggles in the past, we can say they're negative. We can say that, man, I could have got it earlier, could have got my degrees earlier, so forth and so forth. And that is so true. But
Mm.
however, the process is the process, regardless how it happened, how it worked out. Did I, do it right or whatever? As long as I stayed within the process, you are seeing a result of the process,
Right.
right? And so, um, those are the main things that I bring to my students. Is, we are in a history class. I would love for you to learn history, but
Mm.
what I do know is you're not going to love history the way that I love history, because that's just something I fell in love with.
Right.
But I do think understanding history is important because it does tell us as a nation, what decisions were not made, and can we make those decisions today
Mm,
so that it can further push our nation um, into what we say this nation is supposed to be about.
right.
And if it's not, then that's why you always go back to the drawing board and you see where the mistakes were made, and you
Mm,
try to pinpoint. So like I used to hate when my math teacher used to say, "Show your work,"
yeah.
but now I understand what they meant by that. They didn't. It wasn't about them trying to prove that you're wrong.
Right.
If you're wrong, we can go directly to the spot where you were wrong. If you didn't show your work, we don't know where you went wrong. We
Right.
have the slightest idea, and so these are the things that I think are so important to
Mm,
truly understand as we live out our lives and whatever we're doing. Like I love how you spoke about a blessing in disguise at Home Depot. Most people won't say Home Depot is a blessing in disguise.
right.
Most people say, "Oh my God, I'm working an hourly job, and people come in, they got attitudes. I got to deal with their attitude, so forth." But sometimes we are in positions, we are in places, and if you can look hard enough, you can
Yeah.
find the gem in
Right.
in all of those places, in every
Yeah.
single one of those places. But now, is that an easy thing to do? Not always, right?
No.
But you know, but I think those are the things, that becomes important.
Right.
And for me to sit in my own apartment, and I've never missed a payment through the COVID
Mm,
pandemic. For me, that's the blessing.
yeah.
The blessing is I never had to call my rental agency and say, "Hey, can you not charge me this month because I can't make it?"
Right.
I made every payment, and so you know, I think sometimes we skip the simple things in life because I guess we may look at them as, "Oh, that's simple," or that's
Yeah.
but I think they're big. I think they're super big. So
Yeah. I mean,
so anyway, that's my little rant.
no problem. I mean, to your point, it's like, in all honesty, life is simple. And when you remember that, you learn to focus on the simple things and really practice gratitude. Because I know for me, something I was introduced to back in 2017 was the Panda Planner. And one
Uh-huh.
reason I liked it is because it has a daily section where it's like every day you do a gratitude practice where it's you write down three things you're grateful for. So it gives you the prompt. I'm grateful
Right.
for one, two, three. And like for today,
Right.
I was like, I overslept for a training that I had this morning by about an hour, but like I was able to get in there and get 3 hours out of the 4 hours total time.
Right.
And I was able to connect
Right.
with the others and everything like that. But like whenever after the training, I wrote down in my journal, like, I'm grateful for the sleep. Like, I didn't know I was going to sleep that many hours. Like, 7 hours would be the max. And I guess I probably slept up to that if I was up that late. And
Mm.
um, I was like, I'm grateful for the changing seasons, for the weather, because I think the past 2 weeks we've maybe had 3 or 4 days of just straight rain, downpour, and everything, and then the sun just pops right out right afterwards. And I was like, oh man, that's so beautiful. And it's like maybe it reminds me of the Ogmandino Greatest Salesman book where he talks about the second scroll, I will greet this day with love in my heart. And it's
Mm.
like being able to appreciate everything that happens to you, happens for you, like happens around you. Like I'm learning to I'm learning to be at peace with a lot of things, but then even when right after I'm at peace, something comes up and it frustrates me, or it pulls something that I just went through where I thought, oh, like I'm walking on water, nothing's going to touch me now. It's like, no, stuff still comes up. Things are going to frustrate you. And they're there for reminders as to, okay, hey, if somebody's encroaching on your boundary, you simply have to say no. Like, you don't need to go into it. You don't need to give a big explanation. It's like, no is a complete sentence. Walk away, walk with your peace. If the situation changes later, you can always change a no to a yes, but trying to change a yes to a no is going to be more painful. Then you get more emotions into it and all of that. But I appreciate what you said about the simplicity of things, because that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think that's like, for me, that's one of the reason why we're doing this at 5:30 is because I just got finished playing golf.
Oh, nice.
There's something about golf, like, and golf is not a simple game. It's very tough. You
Yeah.
can never. It's like you get one part of it down, and then the other part is. But what I love about golf, I love being outside. Right.
Mm,
This is something about nature that I love,
yeah.
and that I cherish. Um, and then just the joy golf brings to me,
Mm,
right? Like, golf is one of those things that, even I'm not playing well, I'm not hitting it well, I'm still like kind of in an enjoyment of, I'm doing something that, I can afford and I like to do. And I have other individuals that they like it just as much as I do,
right.
which is the reason why we're here, right?
Yeah.
And so but that's the thing, like, and the simplicity of golf is, you don't have to force anything. If the club hits the ball the right way, the
Mm,
ball is going to move forward in a certain way.
mm,
It's when you change whatever you think you need to change,
yeah.
it changed the dynamics of where the golf ball goes, and all of these things.
Mm,
So back, just back to what we're talking about, the simplicity. Life life is really simple.
yeah.
Life really only is asking us to do what we can do, right?
Mm,
What you can control.
right.
You can't control if there's going to be a hurricane tomorrow. You
Yeah.
can't control that. That's out of your control. But what you can control is, can you still be grateful if a hurricane came and swept everything out of your house? Now, everybody missed the memorable stuff, all of these things, but the things that are just so simple is what has, and my whole, like, for me, what has God put me on this planet to do? And I'm so glad I was able to find it.
Yeah.
Because I think some people, like they say, the greatest place on earth that has all of the greatest talent is in the graveyard.
Mm,
Because some people die not doing what they wanted or what they love to do, or what they, or never finding that thing that they could smile about every single day.
right.
And for me, that's what teaching is. Teaching gives me the the energy to say, I made a difference today.
Mm,
Sometimes they hear me, sometimes I'm frustrated at them, sometimes I'm like, I need you to do what I'm asking you to do. Why didn't you do it? And just like you said, you'll
right.
get frustrated, but at the end of the day, there's always this one thing that happens and you're like, this is why this is why I teach.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and that's the interesting thing that I have learned to love,
Mhm.
and I've learned to appreciate. And now I don't necessarily look at my students need to change, my
Mhm.
students need to make any adjustments. I'm going to make the proper adjustments. And hopefully,
Yeah.
by me making the adjustments, they can see, they can see or hear that, you know what, this guy does care for us. You
Yeah.
know, he's not just here for the paycheck. He is really here because he genuinely wants to see us succeed. And
Right.
some get it and some don't.
That's true. I guess I had a couple thoughts bouncing around in my head about teaching, but I guess I wanted to ask you one of my go-to questions, and it might also help us get into your backstory a little bit, because I was like, I stopped kicking myself after the better part of 2020 when I couldn't find, and even I think a month ago I was still looking back. I was like, maybe I can find it somewhere in the catalog where I got this recording, but I'd love to ask you this question. Who do you say you are?
Um, that is a real good question, because I've come to grips, like, okay, it's, on one hand, you don't want to use labels because sometimes labels can interpret who you are.
Mhm.
But I would like to say the label that I have, like, really embraced,
Mhm.
that if I was a kid born in this time frame, like
Mhm.
we're talking about, if I was born as a millennial, let me put it that way,
Right.
I probably would have, or a teacher may have would have followed through and said, there's something we need to investigate about this kid learning behaviors.
Mhm.
And I do believe I would be with a label of ADHD. And some will say, why would you accept that? Don't accept labels. My mind, the way that my mind moves and works, and the things that I do and the things that I've seen, just
Mhm.
me looking at myself, it's very easy for me to go off if you don't catch me,
Yeah.
right? Well, that's an attention disorder
Mhm.
that can be negative,
Mhm.
but I look at it as a positive thing because it now gives me a unique stamp
Mhm.
on how I learn.
Mhm.
And if, when I was going through my K through 12 experience, if a teacher would have been able to harness that,
Mhm.
just like my history professor did,
Yeah.
I would have been able to I would have been a better student, because where we go wrong as my profession, my
Mhm.
teaching profession, is based on the system that they work in.
Mhm.
We tend to teach from a one size fit all mentality.
Yeah.
And a one size fit all mentality is the worst mentality to fit, because everybody learns different.
Right.
So if you really want to say learning disability
Mhm.
or learning differences,
Mhm.
we all have a learning difference.
Right.
It's just finding that process that works for you.
Mhm.
What works for me is seeing things in connection.
Right.
And so when my professor was able to make some connections in history,
Yeah.
I literally I held tight on to that concept.
Mhm.
And now I understand
Yeah.
that history is a subject for an ADHD student
Mm.
because history is not one thing.
Right.
History is a multitude of things going on at the same time.
Mm. Well
And
put.
so my brain can see this, that in front of me, behind me, all at the same time. And
Right.
then find that one thing and put those two wires together and make that connection.
Mm.
So the roundabout way to answer your question, I am a thought leader who have learned to show people how to connect things to things you may not understand, or to things you may not have thought
Mm.
connected.
I like that.
So that's who I am.
I like that. The thing that it was getting me to think of was that, and I hope I don't get you into trouble with this, but I just want, in having conversation and just communicating, I want to communicate openly and kind of get your thoughts on this, because I know 2020 was a year not only of like the pandemic or whatnot, it was also an election year. And with it, even I think before the election year, you've had different happenings in the school systems. And I'm sure you've probably seen it from, I don't know if it was like pre 2013, 2014, because I graduated 2013 and I've been out of the school system since.
Right.
And one thing that I saw out of the West Coast in Washington, I think it was like Evergreen State College, and it was like an incident that happened and it really kind of blew up. And I found out about it through a podcaster, Joe Rogan, interviewing this professor and then him interviewing another psychology professor, where it's like you have a lot of this group think happening where people are in some ways rewriting history or retelling history in a certain way. And it's like a lot of times people tell the bad parts, or they tell part of the story, they only tell the good, but they don't tell you the whole story. So it's like, what's really going on here? And I'll point to something specific to where I don't make it too long of a tangent, but similarly, like you were saying, it's, I'm trying to give enough context to it so where you can kind of pull from and make the connections as you need to based on your experience and what you've studied in history. Um, One of the main things I had a question about is maybe if you've heard of the 1619 project,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and what are your thoughts on that? Because initially I heard about it and I started to listen to it as it was kind of recorded in podcast form. I think it's like a 6-part series, or maybe I got like halfway through. And then when I heard about the story in Evergreen, and then I watched the documentary that they put onto it, saying like from 2015, they had this dean of students or president that kind of came in, and his whole thing was like, okay, yeah, I want to make everyone equal, inclusive. It's like all the words that sound buzzy and they sound
Mm-hmm.
good, but then it's like you never see like the undercurrent and the underbelly that comes with that. And quickly what it became, it's like you have a lot of humanitarian studies that kind of came through masked as like scientific in a sense.
Right.
And like they don't do, or they hadn't done the same thing that the sciences did, but essentially it's like they made claims to things and didn't have any way of backing them up. And then they had an incident in 2017 where this professor is basically being hunted throughout the college campus with students and baseball bats and everything like that, because they're upset that he decided to show up on a day when they decided
I
he
did see
wasn't
that
allowed.
story.
Yeah. Did you hear
I
about
did see.
this or no?
No, I did. I did watch that one where it was
Is with Brett Weinstein?
supposed to be a day that everybody was supposed to.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So like I guess the context of it is supposed to be usually this college, it's that um there's a play that they do where in this play in this town, black people or people of color are usually they take a day of absence where they don't show up to work or they kind of like stay home. So then people start to see the town break down and a lot of services and things aren't being done. So then it's like people found that
Mhm.
appreciation for them. They're like, oh, okay, like that's why so such and such person does this or such and person did that. And every year at this college, they would allow people of color in the same sense to say, hey, in order to observe this holiday or this tradition that we do, if you want to take a day off from school, you're more than welcome to. But then in 2017, somebody got the bright idea. I hope I'm interpreting this right. Somebody got the bright idea to say, okay, instead of allowing people of color not to come if they don't want to, we're they're making it a demand that all white people are basically not allowed on the campus. It's like an observation of
Mhm.
this. And he
Mhm. Mhm.
responded back and he was like, that's racist. Like, you can't exclude people from coming to the college. Like, that completely goes against the values. And it's not just because it's white or another. It's like whatever it is, when you discriminate against someone for the specific color, it's like that's racism. And when people got a hold of it, they got it to some of the students. They basically created a lynch mob to go confront him um, at his classroom while he's teaching. And the only way that they piece the documentary together is because all the students that were in this mob, they're just recording it with social media because they were so proud of what they were doing. And you see not only them recording him, cornering him in the corner, you see them holding hostage the dean of students, the president, the professors. They're like, nope, you can't go to the bathroom. We're going to keep you here until this, that, and the other. And you see the ringleaders, even like they call the dean of student there. They're like, don't use hand gestures. Don't do that. That's oppressive. That's a microaggression. That's this. And it's like, that was the extreme of the things that like I've heard bits and pieces. And I'm like, wow, like a lot's changed since I left school. What's really going on over there? And like next thing you know, they're trying to cancel the sciences. They're trying to get rid of this because they're like, okay, math is white privilege or that's white oppression, or like don't use the master's tools or things of this sort. And it's like, I think we kind of missed the mark here. What's really going on? And I know a lot of people have gotten into trouble for like challenging it or going against it. He eventually left the campus, started doing a podcast with his wife because they both taught at the school, and like trying to just provide people the information that they want and being able to do the work essentially and give people information without the boundaries or the hangups that different people are either fabricating or coming up with. I guess that's all I have on that, but I really wanted to get your take on it because I know like you study history and you don't just go surface level, but you go in and you really seek to explain and make the connections of all the different things that happen without being just very selective and talking about one without all the other things.
Right. So one of the, one of the things historically 1619, the problem is when you say this is the first arrival of Africans.
Mhm.
Okay, historically that's a problem
Right.
because when Columbus was coming, 1492,
Mhm.
in a book written by Ivan Van Sertima, they came before Columbus.
Mhm.
There is a segment in there where Columbus and his men hear drums and they say,
Mhm.
what in the world is that? And then
Mhm.
a ship full of Africans leaving America and
Mhm.
going back to Africa,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you go 1619 is the first moment Africans come to the Atlantic coast.
Mhm.
You negate the huge colossal heads down in Mexico with Negro features. When you say Negro, because
Mhm.
German scientists decided to make these groups of Mongolians,
Right.
Caucasians, and Negro. And so when you look at broad nose, thick lips,
Mhm.
facial features, those are specifically African features,
Right.
right? Um, so saying 1619 is this that is the first, then you negate all of the other, the other part of historical, where you definitely can find stories.
Hmm.
Because how in the world did Columbus know to go west?
Right.
It wasn't happenstance. It wasn't luck of the draw, or he's just like, yeah, you know what, we're gonna just go here. No, he heard stories
Right.
of going westward,
Hmm.
right? And so what I typically stay away from is 1619. 1619 is the moment that we begin to see Africans come under an umbrella of servitude.
Hmm.
Before that, people probably mingle, and we don't know historically how far back, because we got to always remember at one point all land masses were together.
Right.
You can
Pangea.
see that you can see that in the way that how they broke apart. You can see that it looks like South America and
Hmm.
Africa were connected. You can
Right.
put those, like if you saw a puzzle, you could see. So it is the ice ages where the earth got warmer and water started, pushing land masses further from each other and so
Hmm.
forth and so forth. So, um, and then going back to, kind of what you're talking about. One of the things that really that bothers me is sometimes as African Americans, we want to eliminate all things that may be considered negative,
Hmm.
right? My point is, instead of eliminating everything that we consider negative,
Hmm.
tell the truthful story of it.
Right.
So you know, you don't have to. Now, I do agree with, you should not have like the Confederate flag on state buildings,
Hmm.
because everybody utilizes a state building, right?
Right.
But like if you wanted to, tear the issue of tearing the statues down,
Yeah. Yeah.
put them in a museum, because what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Here's what's going to happen. 100 years from now,
Hmm.
people are going to believe that there was no racism in the world.
Right.
Why? Because everything has been erased.
Yeah.
As negative as it is, and even Robert E. Lee said himself, no, don't build statues, because what this war brought about is a whole lot of death.
Yeah.
This wasn't no valor victory. This was brothers, cousins fighting each other based on where did you sit on the political ladder.
Hmm.
And so we, and I say we, African Americans need to look back at history, because I'm more impressed of what the African American ancestors did in the face of real lynching. Now, you want to talk about some real opposition?
Hmm.
They were getting hung and lynched just because. But they didn't sit in their homes and say, I'm a victim, and so now I'm not going to do. They still were working to do
Right.
whatever they could. And I feel like our new, just as we have moved in, we now want to, we haven't stopped saying, I'm a victim,
Yeah.
right? Does that mean racism does not exist? No, it does not.
No.
Racism does exist.
And I
Does
guess
it mean I'm saying, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, to forget that it does, or to want to erase it. Like I can understand certain people's sentiment to want to erase it, but it's like you're kind of doing a disservice to all the history. It's like by not erasing it, it's not like you are embracing it or encouraging it. You're just simply stating like, no, that's a thing there. And a lot of it may be, or a good part of it may be stem from ignorance. Like for people that don't know, if you don't know something about another group, like people go with the negative and it's just like they start to categorize. They say all black people are a certain way, all white people are a certain way, all Hispanics are a certain way. And it's like every time I hear that, I make sure to speak up for myself. Or if I disagree, I just say, most of the time I disagree and I just say no, because growing up here in North Georgia, I was like, people would always talk negatively about Hispanics. And it's like, yeah, there's a big Hispanic population, but like all human beings are not the same. So you can't just continue to place people in groups because it's convenient. Like if you work around a bunch of people that's just terrible, yeah, I could see where you'd make that generalization, but that may have more to do with the quality of people you're around and the environment that produces that, where everybody's cutthroat, everybody's just crappy. It's like maybe change where you are at, like get around somebody. Like we have the internet now, look for something better than what you see, and then maybe that will allow you to shift your perspective. But wanting to wanting your entire environment to change or just calling it one thing because that's all you see, I think that really does a disservice to the whole world, to think that everything is supposed to revolve around me. Like it was thought before, everything revolves around the earth, but it's like, no, we revolve around others, other planets, other things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, yeah, and so yeah, and so the most important thing is, um, like for the reason why I do what I do is because I do it for my ancestors. I do it so I don't make an excuse of why I can't get it to the highest level of education
Mhm.
that I can get to.
Yeah.
And I don't make that excuse of, oh, when I was in school, you know, they didn't teach me my history, or they didn't do such and such, or someone is standing in my way. No, there's not a single person that can stand in my way right now that
Mhm.
can tell me I cannot read a book,
Yeah.
that can tell me I cannot go and research, that can tell me I cannot do this, I cannot do that. And
Mhm.
so for me, everything that I do is for the people who didn't have that, because there were groups
Yeah.
of my ancestral group that definitely were, you could not read, you could not write. But again, I go back to like when Reconstruction happened, like when I teach Reconstruction, I
Mhm.
almost get goosebumps because I look at, here is a group of people
Mhm.
who are, I mean, just removed from slavery. And
Yeah.
it was over 200 years of enslavement. And the first thing when the government said, what can we do?
Mhm.
They said three things: education, economics,
Mhm.
and we want a political voice.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal to me, of these people who knew that this is going to benefit my community if I can get these three things.
Right.
And that's what hurt. That's what killed the poor whites in the South. Is because
Mhm.
what they saw was,
Yeah.
oh, they getting all of this stuff and they just got out of slavery. Why do they deserve it?
Right.
It's because poor whites didn't ask for those things, because they were told, you got the magic bean. You
Mhm.
already have Jack and the Beanstalk. You already got access to Jack and the Beanstalk.
Right.
And they believed that story.
Mhm.
They believed in this giant that they ain't never seen before. And that's why they have always struggled. And so what you saw on January 6th,
Mm-hmm.
you saw the descendants of those in the South that has not been able to let go
Mm-hmm.
of you didn't take the opportunities
Mm-hmm.
that was vetted to you based on your skin color.
Mm-hmm.
So poor whites and poor blacks, and this is why like a lot of people got to begin to truly understand. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the movie that just came out this year, Fred Hampton from the Black Panther,
Mm-hmm.
he went and talked to the Appalachian people.
Mm-hmm.
He made a holistic coalition. He had white folks, Hispanics, and blacks. And he said, we all fighting for the same thing, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
And Appalachian whites were like, yep, you're right. And they were down with the Black Panther movement.
Yeah.
But what happened? Assassination. Because getting a little too close
Yeah.
to the power source. When you get too close to the power source, things have to change. Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X,
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
Bobby Kennedy.
Right.
You get too close to the power source, and we can call it because And I used to be,
Right.
and I ain't gonna lie. Back in the '90s, I was a conspiracy theorist, and I don't really roll with conspiracy theories because the problem with conspiracy theories is you go down one rabbit hole. Next thing you know, you're down another and another and
Right.
another. But however,
Yeah.
you can start to look at things and say, well, why?
Right.
Why did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
What did Fred Hampton do? Because it was 3 o'clock in the morning when they assassinated him and his wife, who were having his baby.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a what you would call a full-fledged, like almost like a firing squad.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So what were they doing? What was he doing that was so bad? Well, he was beginning to tell all people that we all are fighting for, or we all are getting played by the same thing, and here's what we're getting played by. Which
Right.
is why they, at the end, people don't pay attention. Martin Luther King was about to do a poor man's campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor man's campaign was going to be white, black, whoever.
Yeah.
Because it was the people who typically carries the load of American success, but
Yeah.
they don't get to benefit from those success because it always goes to the small few.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why I don't teach, and I learned, and again, I'm a proud to be an African American. I'm proud, and I think, man, African Americans have really made a great amount of historical relevance
Yeah.
as it relates to American history. You can't talk American history without speaking about the things that African Americans have been able to do.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they did all of these things in the midst of opposition.
Right.
So that within itself. But I don't want to have a mentality though of a victim of, oh, this is what, because of that, this is why I can't. No,
Right.
you can. You can move, you can maneuver, you can do. Will
Right.
you get met with opposition? Of course, it
Yeah.
comes. It's as a golf term, it's par for the course, And so, what are we going to do? I look at, nowadays when I talk to my students of little of African American history they know.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what we will say. Well, they
Right.
didn't teach us that. So here is my uh, opposing view on that.
Right.
If a person was in power and they want to stay in power,
Mm-hmm.
why would they give you good things about yourself?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But here's what we do have. You can pull up your laptop.
Yep.
You can look up uh, ancient Egyptians, Kemetic people. You can
Right.
look up Cushites. You can look at uh, the Ethiopians and how they have been a country that has tried to been invaded for so many times, and they have, people have not been able to invade it fully, right?
Right.
You do have the stories of West Africa, Mali, Ghana, Shanghai. You do have the stories of Algeria, Tunisia, and all of those, North Africa, where Lord Tariq goes to Spain and brings, the Moors and all of that. So we have stories, and we have stories of when they say Herodotus is the father of history, and he write about the wonderful Ethiopians.
Yeah.
And you hear about Alexander going down, and everybody's going to Egypt, blowing off the noses, doing these different things, burning down the library, doing all of. Why would you do that if that's not important information?
Right.
So we have it, and you can get to it. Now but what's gonna happen is you got to do a little. You got to get your elbows a little greasy,
Right.
and that's
Right.
that's where we lack. We lack the getting our elbows greasy, and
And I mean,
that's
to
what I
your
try to do. I try to bring that.
right. And I think that's why
Go ahead.
I appreciate what you're doing, and also in learning how to change my language and what I say based on what I want is not. It's like, I guess some people would say, oh, that's naive, that's altruistic, that's looking at, what's the word, optimist. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, what would you rather have? Would you rather be optimist, or would you rather be like, woe's me, dreadful? Is like, what brings you a difference? Okay, so you acknowledge that you're depressed, or you acknowledge that you don't have, like, did that bring you anything? Okay, so
Right.
somebody's gonna give you charity. So like, how long is that gonna feed you? You're gonna wait on them every time? Like, you're gonna wait on somebody's approval every time? And for me, I guess I have the caveat of like, I'm not born in America, but I'm
Right.
African American born. Like, I was born in
Right.
Africa, immigrated to the States,
Right.
and I didn't learn African history earlier on. But what I have learned and what I'm learning, just even reading Dennis Kimbrough's book, it's like, this is my African American history 101, just from reading the quote. That's like, oh, this person, like, I've never heard of that person before. So it's like I started looking them up just to get a picture. And like, obviously, a picture comes from a website. I can read the website and I can say, okay, this gentleman, this woman, this person is this. Obviously, it tells me, okay, this was a songwriter, this was a PhD, this was a doctor, this was that. It's like, there's so much more there, but I refuse to accept or to tell anyone that you don't have. No, it's, you have what you have based on what you want. And even relearning the assessment as we known it in the past, it's like, okay, for so long, like when it was first introduced to me, I looked at the how. This is how you
Mm-hmm.
show up in the world. This is how you behave. It's like, okay, your how is based on your why. Like, you behave
Mm-hmm.
a certain way for a certain reason, and the why comes from the what. You have to know, if you know what you want or what it is that you do naturally, that tells you, okay, because I do this, I want to do this for this reason. And being a human being, being someone that's free will, like, that always changes. Like, never let somebody put you in a box to say, oh, we always, it's like, anytime somebody says we in conversation, I just kind of argue the point. I'm like, who's we? Like, who are you talking about? Me and you? Are you talking about all people? Like, do you know every single person on this planet that you've met, all
Right.
8 billion of them? Like, how do you know that? Okay, you had this experience. So like, let's look at something different. If we jump on Google, it's like, look, okay, here's Eric Thomas, a PhD. he wasn't always a PhD, but it's like, here's a successful Black American, Black African American. It's like, don't
Mhm.
tell me that there are
Right.
no successful, there's no one good. It's like, yeah, it wasn't always that, but like, as people are in their process, like, success is subjective to every person. But again, back to the Augmendino thing, it's like the first scroll talks about is not there necessarily to help you achieve success, but to avoid failure. And it's like, everyone knows what failure is doing, not doing what you set out to do. Like, simply put, like,
Right.
anybody can identify with that. But success could be monetary, could be family, could be spiritual, could be health, could be whatever it is you put your mind on. But it's like, yeah, I appreciate what you do and what how you said that. But every time I hear someone just say like we, or I'm like, let's pump the brakes, because I was like, at least I was like, in a we statement, I'm like, I feel like I'm included in there. So I'm just gonna dip my toe out to just be like, here's where I draw the line. I embrace the person that I'm speaking with, but I'm like, if we're gonna speak as a collective, let's try and establish the standards or what it is that we're talking about, so that we have a firm foundation to say like, okay, did we consider all our options, or are we just going off of limited information that's been provided to us, but we haven't taken the time to dive into?
Right. And that's one of the major missteps that we have, right? Because I can look at you and say, "Oh, you're African American,"
Right.
right? Right? Like African American from the standpoint of you were born here in America, you Black. Like,
right.
don't tell me you ain't Black. But then you would say, "Well, no, my experience is I'm from Africa,
Yeah.
and I came to America, and when I came to America, I was even looked at very differently
Right.
in the spaces I was in. And I couldn't say I'm the African American experience that you're talking about because
Right.
I haven't.
Right.
And so now it's like, because we want to put everybody in the same box. We want
Right.
to put we want everybody to wear the same shoe size. Everybody doesn't wear the same shoe size.
Yeah.
Shaq wears a 22 or 24. You know what I'm saying? So,
Right.
but there's a reason why we have different sizes of shirts and pants and everything that we have is because no one person is fit the same way, right?
Yep.
And so the what is so interesting to me is the whitewashing of education that we think everybody else is getting
Mhm.
is the same education we got.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you will look at and you will say the words, "Oh, that's a third world country. Oh, they're not getting great education."
Right.
Well, you got an education or had an opportunity to be educated, and you're not.
Nope. And they probably know more than
You're
you
not.
because they're studying you and they're studying themselves to get out of where they're from.
You see what I'm saying? And so I laugh because it's just like here's here's why I am where I am today.
Mhm.
When I was 17, this is literally what happened, and
Mhm.
this is to go into the story of my backstory of me.
Yeah.
At 17, I felt like I didn't know what African American meant. I know
Mhm.
what it looked like
Mhm.
because you gave me the description.
Right.
I know I fit in that because I know I'm not part of the what we would call the white community.
Right.
So I know I'm different.
Yeah.
I know I'm not Hispanic because I don't speak Spanish or that's not my language. My language is the English language that was brought from England, right?
Right. Right.
And so for me, and this is why I think the uniqueness of how I grew up in Germany.
Mhm.
I grew up as a military kid. We didn't really get to see racism really.
Mhm.
We know it was there, but we
Yeah.
didn't really see it. Like
Right.
it wasn't like walking down the street, hey, N-word. We didn't get that,
Right.
okay, from a white individual. Because typically white, black, Hispanic, if you're a part of the American military force, y'all all the same in Germany because you in another country,
Right.
right? So I just never felt like the educational system valued differences.
Mm.
And so at 17, when I asked the question, I don't even really know what African American means. This is the beauty of process.
Mm.
My first understanding and being proud to be African American
Mm.
was on a historically Black college and university,
Mm.
where that's all I saw. Like the majority of the people look just like me.
Right.
You had your ghetto fabulous folks that's doing their thing.
Mm.
But I got a glimpse at that moment that there were some Black folks that were trying to be doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, architects, and whatever variety of degrees was on the campus of Prairie View A&M. I was able to see everybody going for something.
Mm.
So it gave me a sense of pride of, okay, no, we're not lazy, or we're not all this one way or that one way, right?
Right.
And then I ran into some guys who I really attribute them really just being around them, like you said, change your environment.
Yeah.
Because those guys were so smart and intellectual, I didn't want to sound like the dumbest person in a circle.
Mm.
So I began to read a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit.
Right.
And I began to study some stuff, and I began to, really find things, that I never heard before. And then from there, it led me to start doing more research and more research. And then I ran into my good friend still today, in Huntsville. He had, at one point, he had the only African American bookstore, and he knew history. He knew history. And I would just go and talk with him. Him and I would talk for hours. Like I would literally spend 6 hours of my time.
Wow.
Sitting down with him, talking. And he
Yeah.
would share videotapes with me, and this historian and this historian and this historian and this historian. And what really hit me, it really started telling me, hold your head up. You are somebody, and you're a part of a group that is somebody as well. History will say you were this, but that's not the true history, or that's only part of it, right? And so it is those things that, for me, that made me want to know more and more and more and more. And then I got to the point, because you go through phases. So you go through a phase of your life where you hate anyone outside of your group. Because for the longest, you've been walking around with no information about your historical presence in anything.
Right.
And so you get angry at the people, and you're like, well, why didn't y'all give it to us? Then you get past the anger part, because harnessing anger in your body only causes damage to your body. It doesn't cause damage to anybody else.
Yeah.
And so then you begin to say, you know what? They don't know either, because they're getting the same story that I got.
Yeah.
So it really began to put into me, when I would meet people, I would challenge them. and challenge them historically. No, that's not how it went. Let me
Yeah.
tell you. Let me tell you some other viewpoints,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can make your decision which one you want to go with. If you want to keep going with the one you got, that's okay.
Right.
That's fine. I can't tell you which one to go to. But however, you can't negate this other perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've learned over time, I'm going to make people mad no matter who they are. I'm going to make Black folks mad
Right.
because at some points I'm going to have to challenge them because some of the information that comes out of some folks' mouth sometimes is completely wrong. And I am not into allowing anybody, if you're wrong and historically I know you're wrong, I'm going to correct it.
Right.
Only because we got to stop telling history from an incorrect viewpoint.
Right.
So we can talk about Columbus, and we can talk about he did open up European exploration.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also can talk about his behavior,
Mm-hmm.
how he sicked dogs on the native people, how he, did certain things, and it's in his own journal.
Yeah.
And the minister that was with them, Bartholomew Las Casas,
Mm-hmm.
wrote the same thing.
Yeah.
So what I've learned to do is I don't tell you what Merrill thinks. I
Right.
tell you the facts.
Right.
Because what you will not do is dispute facts.
Right.
Now you can dispute how did who wrote the facts, because yes, who gets to tell the narrative most part is the victor. They get to write the narrative of history in their viewpoint.
Right.
But it's still not wrong though.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not wrong.
Right.
They just didn't add in the other parts. That's
Right.
all.
I'm over here
So I
laughing.
come in. So my job is, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking I'm over here laughing to myself because I was thinking of present day and I had two examples pop to mind with popular culture. And I was like, let me hold off until later because that might not be appropriate to interject with that.
So
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I was gonna say, because I bring in, I'm gonna show you the whole thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
And I'm not gonna dictate which one you need to agree with.
Right.
You don't have to agree with me. I always tell my students, you do not have to agree with me. But what I am gonna tell you to do is do your research. And when you do your research, you will see I don't make up the stuff that I'm talking to you about.
Right.
I'm not making that up. I see it from different viewpoints. And as a historian, my job is not to satisfy one group or the other.
Right.
And I'm not going to. And I will not apologize for that.
That's
because I'm going to tell history in the way history should be told.
Right.
And I think that's what my professor was really trying to tell me back when he told me, have I ever thought about being a historian? Because he must have seen that I was willing to write as truthful as I can about what I understand.
Right. You're telling the whole story, not just his story.
Yeah. I don't tell, and I don't just tell, because I'm African American. I'm not going to always tell the African American version, because there's the Afrocentric concept, and I read a lot of the Afrocentric, and I agree with definitely with a lot of the Afrocentric thought patterns. But as a historian, I can't go one versus the other. I just got to lay everything out.
Yeah.
That's how I see history.
Right.
I got to lay everything out.
Got you. Yeah. It's funny. I was talking with one of my coworkers and he's African American. And I think maybe last weekend or the weekend before, he made a statement, and I was kind of just like, huh. He's like, you didn't really grow up like a regular black kid, did you, listening to music? And I was like, no, that I didn't, because like I really didn't get introduced to music like outside of gospel music up until college, or like end of high school. And I was like, that's just not what I was exposed to. Like, I grew up as a preacher's kid. I'm still a preacher's kid. And it's like, there's some things about that I'm learning to appreciate more so now. And then, like, having that kind of Jonah syndrome where it's like, you don't want to follow your dad's footsteps necessarily, like going into ministry. Like, that was one of the things where I was just like,
Right.
oh, I want nothing to do with that. But
Right.
thinking back to my childhood, and having my nickname be teacher growing up, like I would always be called teacher.
Uh-huh.
And like my dad jokes about it from time to time when we talk. It's like, oh, you're teaching. And I was like, I've always had an appreciation for teachers, because I'm like, they're giving information that I've never had before, and they're willingly sharing it with you. If you're willing to sit down and listen, like, for the information that you want, like, you can learn anything. Like, just sit down and listen. Like, you'll learn what you need to learn. But the so I guess even in doing this, like, I'm learning, and being able to share my experience. It's like I'm learning to teach in a way. And even as it goes further into consulting and being able to do that in the future, I was like, wow, to think that going through engineering school, going through and working as an engineer and learning the ropes there, and being that, it's like, okay, like, as I'm doing this current job at Home Depot, I'm actually becoming more comfortable with myself again, to a different level. It's like, okay, it was one thing being highly educated, having these sets of skills, putting them to the use, having to draw on different skills you kind of forgot you had as talents. And now it's like, I remember when I told one of my first or second supervisors that, from working here in town, I was like, oh yeah, I'm working at the Home Depot, because like he rattled off this list of things. He was like, oh, he went to Georgia Tech. He's this pastor's son, and he did this. He's worked all over. And then I tell him, oh, I'm working at Home Depot. You just see like the change in his face. And I was like, as I'm becoming more comfortable with who I am and where I am, I'm not concerned with what somebody else thinks I should be doing, or what title they think I should hold. Like, through and through, I was Asher before I was the engineer. I was Asher before
Right.
I was everything else. And it's like, I'm still that, because when you put a podcast together, that's engineering in its sense. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background. Initially, you might think, oh, it's just two people talking, but it's like, they have to be in agreement. There has to be a cadence. There has to be a relationship there. There has to be a give and take. And that's what you do when you build something. Whenever you're doing analysis, you're problem solving. It's like you and the paper, but it's like, when you're interacting with humans, now you've got to take the skills you learned in the classroom and see if what you worked really worked. Because, okay, you're following these plans. I did this for about the last 4 years, where you're working to a plan, and it's basically trial and error. As soon as the plan, they drew it up, they designed it, it falls apart, or somebody can't fit in there to physically do this. It's like, hey, we got a problem, and we've got to come up with a fix on the spot. So if they're not willing to hear us, if you're not willing to hear the person that's on the other end, it's like, okay, your degree, your knowledge, and all of what you think whenever you're just sitting behind a computer means absolutely nothing if you're not willing to step away from that and be like, okay, like, all the knowledge and information I have, it now has to interact with the world. Like, it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And as much as you may get, like, you get the education, you apply it, you trust it, you try it. If it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. Like, some things you can control, and then there's a whole lot of things you can't, but you got to step up and just keep it moving.
Yeah, the number one thing that you just said is we have to learn how to problem solve. And one thing I know about engineers, because that's one of my best friends,
Yeah.
he is an engineer. And we talk about problem solving all the time. Like he explained to me, you should, like he would say, no, I'm not afraid of a computer because a man made the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, my job is to figure out what was that man thinking when he was putting together the computer.
Right.
And so he goes through that process. Now he don't know specifically what the man is, but he thinks about, okay, a man would think in this way, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so everything we do in life is about solving a problem, which
Mm-hmm.
is why I think educational system needs revamping, right?
Yeah.
Because what we have taught kids to do is memorize.
Yeah.
Kids are great memorizers, right? They can memorize all what, because all you got to do is tell them, keep
Right.
saying it over and over
Right.
and over,
You
and
just every time just through repetition, whether you want to memorize it or not, you're going to memorize it.
right, and so where I think like if I was a math teacher,
Mm-hmm.
right, I would spend time on the concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll spend some time on the concept,
Yeah.
but where I would spend bulk of my time is giving them word problems,
Mm.
not pages fully solve
Right.
these answers, and then you go to the
Right.
back of the book and you look at all of the odd numbers and
Yeah.
you see how do they solve it, and then you try to figure out how to solve it, right?
Right.
No. You give them a word problem, because what does a word problem? What will you have to do with a word problem? There's several things you got to do with a word problem. Number one,
Mm.
you got to read to comprehend.
Mm.
Number two, you're gonna have to use some critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
Number three, you have to know the equation in order to solve the problem.
Right.
So if I teach you the equation, and then I'm gonna give you all of these word problems, but a lot of people don't do word problems because everybody's, oh, I can't stand why, what words and have to
Yeah.
do with math. It has everything to do with solving problems.
Yeah.
To solve a problem is a word problem. It's a word problem.
Mm.
To know what to put out when people first come into Home Depot is a word problem,
Yep.
because you have to decide. We know people shop by their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that a certain thing has to be in the front to catch them, to get them to go to whatever aisle we want them to go to.
Right.
That's what all that stuff is. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they put the mannequins in the front with the
Right.
clothes on. Because you're like, oh, that's a nice outfit. And
Yeah.
then you go like, let me go see if I can find those pants. And you may want that shirt, or you may find another shirt.
Yeah.
But the goal is to get you past, I'm just looking,
Right.
right? Excuse me.
Man, they're tearing you up over
And
there with
how do
those
you do that?
allergies.
Yeah, man, it's killing me, man. But problem solving is the number one key
Right.
to everything. And that's the thing that I try to get my students to learn as it relates to history.
That's
You're going to
good.
try to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And the problem you're going to try to solve is how do you make a better future for you
Mm.
and for your children, if you have children, for your family? How do
Right.
y'all do that?
Mm.
Well, we got to go back and look at some decisions that were made in the past
Right.
that is affecting us today,
Right.
and not make those same decisions,
Mm.
right? Just like what Georgia just did, right? Georgia
What they do.
Georgia saw with the power of voting,
Mm.
and now they passed laws to make it harder for mail-in voters.
Mm.
You can't give water or food to people standing in long lines anymore. That's a felony.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so what happened is, and it's always interesting to me.
Yeah.
One of the first lessons you learn in kindergarten is don't cheat.
Mm.
Right? They tell you cheating is not good.
Yeah.
If you cheat, it's unfair. It's all of these things.
Right.
But the way a lot of people have won, because they cheated.
True. They say if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So here is a concept that everybody's learning, but the people who get to tell us what we can and cannot do does the opposite of that.
Right.
Does the opposite of that. Give me a second, man. Let me get some
Sure.
tissue real quick.
All right.
My nose is running.
Well, it's 7 now.
It's what?
7 p.m.
Oh, I know. Right. We started at 5:30, didn't we?
Yeah. It's all good, man.
No.
But I mean,
yeah.
We can wrap up. I mean, I feel like it's been 2 years or close to 2 years since I talked to you last. Because I think we talked then and hadn't really had a chance to catch up since then.
Right. And I will say, I mean, I can see the difference in you, though, Asher. I really see a big difference. Within, when I first met you, you seemed like you just didn't have confidence in yourself.
Nope.
It just. You could just hear it in your
transition.
Voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just hear it in your voice, and you could just hear it, and it takes us again. Here I am. I'm 47, about to be 48, and I feel like, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm now getting, really where I really wanted to be, and it's been a long process, and
Right.
I still have a part of me that doubts and doesn't think that I deserve, that people are, because of their status, I still think about those things. But I'm leaning more and not really caring about what other people have. It's because they got what they did, for their lives, and so forth. And I'm where I need to be,
Right.
and and so, just looking back, and I spent so long as a victim. So when I hear people victimized, I understand, because I played the victim for a long time. Oh yeah, I don't write well because I didn't have good English teachers, and it's their fault. Well, if you write more, excuse me.
Bless you.
Man, it's bad today. Man, God. If you write more, you'll get better in writing, right? Because you'll start learning. Oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Oh yeah, you know what? That I and so forth. And so I spent so long blaming what everybody else had done to me versus really just focus on, you know what? Yeah, I may not be the greatest writer. I may not be Dan Brown or, excuse me.
Bless you.
I may not be any of those writers, but guess what? All of those writers, they have editors too.
Right.
So I'm quite sure their editors sometimes look at their work and like, what in the world did they, what are you talking about, right?
Right.
But an editor's job is to look at it, change it, and mode. So I finally got into that mode, and then I said, like I'm reading, my book is over there. Like I'm reading a book now called How to Teach Students to Learn. Because students don't know how to learn, really, truthfully.
Right.
And that's not a knock on students. It's because the way, the K through 12 education is set up.
Yeah. You just kind of shuffle them through the process.
Right. And you don't really teach them how to learn. They don't really have really a concept of really learning, right?
Yeah.
Because learning is not, can you regurgitate everything I say to you?
Yeah.
Learning is, can you take A and B and see if they connect? If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't.
Right.
Kind of like what you were saying,
Yeah.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of to me now,
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of failure.
Mm.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
The beauty of failure is, thank you. The beauty of failure is not that you failed,
Mm.
it's just giving you tips on you can't do it that way.
Right.
So don't say bless you no more. Just we bless me for the rest of the
Right.
day.
I got you.
But it's gonna keep on going.
Yeah.
Uh,
We'll wrap up soon so that
so
you can
so I
get some Zyrtec or something. Because
yeah.
that's what, not doing a
That's
plug for them,
okay.
but I had to get some earlier or last month because I'd forgotten about like hives that I'd developed back in high
Oh,
school,
okay.
and I
Right.
took it and I kind of weaned myself off of it, and then one day I got back and it's like this weird rash was coming on. I was like rushed to the primary care, and the doctor started asking some questions, and she was like, have you ever had this or this? And I was like, huh, now that you mention it, I remember back sophomore year of high school, I don't know what caused it, but this. And it's like, okay, well, I want you to take some of that, take the steroid cream, take this moisturizer to make sure that your skin is as it needs to be, and make sure you're hydrating your skin. I was like, okay, I got it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And mine is definitely when seasons are about to change, and we're going out of
Yeah,
winter and getting into spring,
especially you're here in Alabama, right
and it
next to
definitely
Georgia.
heightened.
You got all this
No,
pollen
I'm in
just
Delaware
hanging out.
now.
Oh, you're in
Well,
Delaware
I'm in
now.
Delaware
Okay,
now. I'm back home
gotcha.
now. I'm back
Okay.
home now. But Delaware is now blooming too, because Delaware
Oh,
was
okay.
cold,
Right.
and now Delaware is opening itself up. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a double dose of it.
Mm.
I got the Alabama,
Right.
and now I have the Delaware. But
Mm.
but yeah. So yeah, I'm just learning, man, that and it's not easy. It's definitely, nobody wants to fail. Like, I mean,
Right.
like, I don't wake up like, hey, I just really want to fail today. But I do have to say that if I'm not failing, then am I learning really?
Right.
And so failing lends itself to, you have to go back to the drawing board, and I do that as a teacher. Like,
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about, I'm about to revamp all of my classes for the fall.
Mm.
Right. And most people be like, oh man, don't, just keep teaching the same way you teach. And,
Right.
if they get it, they get it. They don't, they don't. No.
Yeah.
For me, I can't do that, because
That's not who
I'm
you
now
are.
understanding that. And I now understand they really don't know how to learn.
Mm.
They really haven't been asked. It's like asking someone,
Yeah.
have you ever asked the question? And this is the hardest question that a human can ask themselves.
Mm.
Who am I? Who am I?
Yeah.
And I used to do this in my class. And I'll say, okay, if I ask you the question, who am I? What's the first thing you're gonna say? Judy Bloom. I said, that's a name. I didn't ask you your name. I said, who are you?
Mm.
I'm Judy Bloom. I said, okay. I said, well, let's go with that answer real quick. Did you choose that name?
Mm.
No. I said, well, who gave you that name? My mother gave me that. Oh, okay. So you're telling me you're Judy Bloom, but someone else gave you the name.
Mm.
So who are you? And then when you start to ask that question, it's a more deep, intimate answer. It's I'm a person that can accept I don't know everything, that I'm going to fail. my students may come to my class and I may say some wrong information, and they may correct me. Can I accept that? Can I accept, that that I have to always work to better myself because I'm never there. You're never, if you say you're there, then really it's time to retire then, because
Right.
you've gotten to where there is, but
Yeah.
there is no there. It's always, you're going to consistently change and learn and mold and shape and move. And so what has been so interesting to me is how God has been able to do that for me, and how God has been able to um, bring certain people in my life to open my eyes up to certain things. Like for one of the greatest, I believe, advice I've ever gotten is from Double P.
Yeah.
And Double P told me, "Hey, won't you read? You should read the Bible like you read history books." Asher, that changed my life. I now not only know the stories, I know the principles, I know part of, even though you can go back and read it and find something new in
Yeah.
those stories, but I was able to understand the Bible in a way I've never had been able to understand, because I took the way that I learned
Right.
and read the Bible in that same manner.
Right.
And so, and I'm working on a piece now, utilizing the developmental of my life through looking at the developmental of Gideon, Elijah, Jeremiah, and David. And I believe all four of those characters that have been given to me,
Yeah.
all have different developmental stages. You will be, at one point, you will be a Gideon. Another point, you will be an Elijah. Another point, you will be a Jeremiah. And another point, you will be a David. And so I'm looking at those stories and I'm reading those stories and seeing the process and how they were even developed. And I'm starting to see the patterns between all of them.
Yeah.
Kind of is the same. It's like, number one, you don't believe in yourself. Number two, you go to straight, like in a form of doubt, and then, or unbelief.
Yeah.
And then you go into this next stage.
Yeah.
And you can see it in all three.
Yeah.
David, right? David was not when they came, the father put all his sons up in front of everybody.
Right.
David out in the field somewhere.
Right.
And they came to him and said, "You don't have anybody else?" And then they said, "What about him?" And he's like, "Him? He's the least of." But when David finally got what he was supposed to do, was the battle against Goliath. Nobody else was able to step up.
Right.
David said, "I got 5 rocks and I'm about to do this." So but even David had a moment of doubt when Saul was looking for him. He was hiding. David hid.
Right.
That was a form of doubt. Form of doubt. So anyway.
That's good. I was just gonna say, in looking through these, are you just looking through it yourself personally, or are you going to present on this at some point?
I'm going to present on them at some point as a series.
And you're gonna record it?
I'm gonna record it. I'm gonna have a workbook to go with it.
Nice.
I want it to be almost like a class.
I like it.
Yeah.
Because whenever you started mentioning them, a professor I started to follow, like I was saying, from the happenings of like 2018 and or I think maybe 2016, but I found out about him 2018, 2019, was Jordan B. Peterson, a Canadian psychologist.
Mm,
And I watched like all his videos with Joe Rogan where they were doing like 3 hour long podcasts, and just the thing he kept hitting on was just uh, the individualistic approach to where it's like you have to take personal responsibility for yourself, and it's very important to where you don't get just looped into a group because you can lose yourself and lose your way. And something that he did to really educate himself was that he went and, in order to figure out why is the Bible so important, he did a biblical series on the Bible, and maybe did like different chapters starting from Genesis and just working through the book of Genesis, going through each story and talking about the Bible as he understood it from his study, what he read, bring in the different artwork and things like that from a psychological perspective, explaining that like it's not as much as people just look at it and just some people just are so quick to throw it away. It's like this is something that was created over thousands of years by several people to do that. And it's like you don't just create a story that fits this well and over this period of time unless there's something that's like really holds it at the
yeah,
center. And it's
yeah,
like too many people have become so arrogant, especially with our intellect, where we believe, oh, it's just like this or it's not that. And it's like you're going to miss so much if you don't consider that, one, you don't know as much as you think you know, and then two, like there's so much more there than what you yourself might see. So like him going through it, it's like almost going to the extent of what he knows or what he's found out, and not allowing, like if he doesn't know, it's like a 3 hour lecture each night where they met in an auditorium and everything. And it's like once he gets to the end of it, he'd take some questions. And then if he didn't know, it's just like, I don't know that yet, but like let me, I don't know, maybe we'll highlight it later on from what he's planned out. And I was like, man, seeing that from him doing it back in 2018 before his first book came out, and things like that are really what's restructuring the educational system. Because it's like if the people that are in control of it now, more or less, more than likely they're not going to change it in the way that it needs to be changed. So it's left up to you and others, possibly like myself, to continue to create the information and the content that people need. And however it is, there are going to be new systems that come into place in order to help people attain that. And hey, if the educational system needs to be like the next blockbuster, then it's got to go.
yeah. So there's a lot that you just said, and I want to pin one part, and this is why I love how I grew up. My father listened to music like no other. I mean, literally, my dad was a music junkie. He listened
Mm.
to jazz, country, R&B. He listened to and he would buy records, and he would always play music around us. And what makes me so different is my mantra is I am so you asked that question and I really didn't really answer the question. Who am I? If I could do it in one sentence, this would be
Mm.
the sentence. I am hip hop meets history. And I'm not talking about hip hop in the form of hip hop, because hip hop is deeper than just rap music.
Mm.
Hip hop was a movement. Hip hop was young people looking at their situation and saying, hey, y'all have been looking the other way on us.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go back and you go back and you listen to one of the first kind of songs in the 70s that came out, late 70s that
Mm-hmm.
came out, Grandmaster Fashion Melly Mel, the message in that song, you know, it starts off, it talks about broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the stage like they just don't care, roaches in the front, junkies in the back,
Mm-hmm.
something with the baseball bat, you know, and so he's giving you a vivid picture
Mm-hmm.
of where he lives
Mm-hmm.
and what's really going on. And he arches with this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes to make you wonder how I keep from going under. So see, people get all of that and they're like, oh, that's cute. He put the words together and he rhymed.
It's
No,
not the whole
listen
thing.
to what he said because
Right.
he is telling you this is messed up as a kid growing up in this.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know why we go crazy? And the reason why I haven't gone crazy, it's a miracle. Because
Mm-hmm.
I should be extremely crazy in this type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just said, when you said the intellectuals, Erykah Badu had a song when she first came out called On and On. And her song would be on and on and on and on. My cipher keeps rolling like a rolling stone. I've been going on the water with $3.06. Oh, you may laugh because you did not do your math. 1, 2, 3. So she comes right there. She said, I go underwater with $3.06. That's 360. Water is a representation of who we are. We're over 70% made of water.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go underwater, as you know from your dad's profession,
Mm-hmm.
you typically go under and you should come out as a new. That's 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
A 180 is half. Another 180, you're not the same person when you went under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she goes on to say, most intellectuals don't believe in God, but their heroes are just the same.
What's that mean?
What you just said of how we talk about how intellectuals have forgotten that really all of us are spiritual beings experiencing a physical life.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to go back to the thing you were made out of.
Yeah.
And the thing that gave you life will be the thing that will be taken, but you will be able to experience an eternal, if that's your journey, you will be able to experience eternal happiness
Mm-hmm.
based on how you did
Mm-hmm.
in your physical journey.
Right.
And that right there,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to the pyramids in Egypt and see that whole dramatization drawn out.
Wow.
Yep. So you can see that. So you can see all of that. And that's also the same thing when you read the biblical text. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Right.
You go through this whole thing because the whole point is for the return of the Son. But the Son doesn't come until the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
But what does the Old Testament do? It's showing you the connections to who's coming.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of the biblical text. You have a whole book speaking of something that's coming, but you don't know that it's coming
Mm-hmm.
until you get to the New Testament.
Wow.
So anyway, man.
That's
Hey,
beautiful.
it was great, man. I mean, I don't know if we got too much into my backstory.
I think we got enough.
But I listen, I would say, man, you stay on course, man.
Thank
Do
you.
not get off your course, man, because you drove this whole thing, whether you want to believe it or not. You drove this whole bus for us. And the one thing I've learned, or the one thing that I appreciate the most, is let it be organic.
Yeah.
Let it be organic, because what happens is when people listen to it, they'll hear the authenticity. Authenticity. I can't even say the word today right now.
We'll just leave it alone.
Yes, let it go. Um, but it's authenticity. I got to get it right. As a teacher, I can't let it go. As a teacher, you got it.
I mean, sometimes
right?
you just got to let it pause for a minute, let it breathe, and then you'll get it back.
You're right. And so, man, no, I really appreciate it. Even you pushing me to do it. When you texted today, I was like, dang, I forgot about it. Oh my God. And I was like, dang, I wanted to watch basketball. But I really did enjoy really spending this hour. Like, basketball is not even in the forethought of my mind, man, because this is what I believe. This is what I wanted to do, is really get people to hear me and know that, man, I wasn't the kid that always got it right. I was the kid that flunked out of school twice. I couldn't read on grade level. So if I can do it, you can do it too. But the thing is, you gotta want, like, at a point, I got to a point in my life where I wanted education.
Right.
And I didn't know exactly, where it was going to lead me, and again, the beauty of God is when you can just sometimes, and sometimes God don't wait for us anyway. He gonna make the decision for you anyway.
Right.
But who knew, from all that I was suffering back in Alabama, of believing I wasn't nothing, to he brought me to a whole new state and made me really put me on a higher level. Like, I mean, because there I would have been just a high school teacher. I'm a professor now. It has a different ring. When I go and I talk to people, and they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a professor. You can see their face like, oh wow. It gets it, it's like, and the funny thing is, they don't think I have a PhD. And I'll be like, no, not yet. But you can be a professor with a master's degree, because master means you mastered learning to where you can teach someone. That's what master means. Because because a PhD is fairly new. And when I say fairly new, this wasn't always everybody had to have a PhD. All you had to have was a master's.
Right.
And then someone said, we want to switch the game. And now we want you to get a PhD.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, good sir.
Likewise. I was thinking just as we wrap up, where should people expect the to find you, or where do you want people to follow you, either on social media or when you get around to dropping the series, if you're going to do it weekly or monthly, like where should they look out for that?
People can follow me now, all one word, History with Swag, with 2 G's. History with Swag, Instagram.
Okay.
I've put up a couple just me showcasing some of my music skills. I make beats and stuff.
Okay.
Not to not to be not to sell or produce. I'm not in that mindset. I'm just a creative person.
Right.
And music, again, you know, as I was saying before, music has really influenced, you know, what I do, and you know, I really embrace music like this time, you know, like you used to hear on the prayer line. Sometimes I could come up with a song in a situation, and that's just because for me, I hear music in a different way, and so I've kind of showcased. I have a lot of videos, but I am working on where I want to put up more videos, especially history videos. You know, a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, just you know, with videos and music behind it, and I'm also working on just a lot of stuff. I'm creating a class about hip hop.
Okay.
You know, and not just we're gonna look at we're gonna listen to Tupac and dissect Tupac's music. No, we're really gonna look at hip hop from the standpoint of how was hip hop shaped and in the years as relates to economically, politically, socially, and culturally. Because there's 4 distinct decades that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the 1980s to 1989, 1990 to 1999, 2000 to 2010. I mean 2009, 2010 to 2019, and just looking at how hip hop has changed. But has hip hop changed because of hip hop, or has hip hop changed because of economically, socially, culturally, and politically what's been going around it?
Right.
You know,
that's good.
And
so it's all on your Instagram, history with a swag. And
history with swag.
History with swag. 2 G's on swag.
Yeah, 2 G's on swag. Yeah.
Appreciate you, Sonny D.
Oh man, appreciate you, Asher, man. Great job, so.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
This is the It's My Time podcast with Asher Tchoua.